start a simple pinch pot, you're just starting with a soft piece of clay, a plastic piece of clay, and you can ball it up in your hands like this, and you're just going to put your thumb in the middle and start pinching slowly, gently, and methodically as you turn this ball of clay around and around. And just the pressure on the inside and the outside of the clay is compressing it and making it thinner and creating an open form, so a bowl-like form. So this is a small vessel that you can make just with your hands. And this is a good exercise to learn the material of clay and how malleable it is and what your hands can do as tools. But what is also important about doing a pinch pot or making a pinch pot is that it is a basis for understanding how you can manipulate the clay and how the interior of a vessel is related to the exterior. So you're feeling that wall thickness as you're forming this pot. So that's a very basic pinch pot. And you would make something like this, something that's open, very functional. You can take an open form and add to it. So this is a piece of Navajo pottery, and it was started from a pinch pot, and then coils were added to it. So it's now become more ceremonial in nature. You can take pinch pots and join the two open ends together to create a closed form, create something that's purely sculptural or decorative. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to make it easier to translate this image onto the clay. So if I just line up my printed out image onto the square of clay, I can literally just trace with a ballpoint pen, and I'm using a red pen so you can see, but I'm just gonna trace the biggest shapes that I see. I'm not trying to pierce into the, through the paper into the clay. Okay, so I'm gonna just peel that off, and you can see now I have this very faint shadow of where my composition is going to lie on this tile. For our project, we're gonna use the pinch method to analyze and recreate the forms that we see in our botanical objects. So we've already traced out the design or drawn it out onto the slab. And I have the original object here. And what I'm gonna do is I wanna try to recreate this object, but in this much larger format. So in case you can't see it in the video, this is about the size that I'm trying to create for this wall piece. So the first thing that I wanna do is really look at the form, so the three-dimensional shape, and this is an orb. So I want to make something that's really round, and I can go about this a couple of different ways. So I'm going to use the pinch method to make all of these little shapes, and I just started with a little ball of clay. And then I'm going to use the pinch method to make each little part of this pod, and each part of it is a little cone shape. So I just am pinching a tiny pinch pot. And I've already made a bunch of them. And one thing I can do is try to recreate this shape by joining them all together. Well, if I do that, I might discover that it's kind of difficult to get them to be nice and round. So I'm going to create another shape that these can go on top of. So on a small ball of clay. Okay, so that's about the right size for my composition. And it does not have the right texture because this has, it's more like that. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna join this to my substrate. Most important thing whenever you're joining two pieces of clay together, or any pieces of clay together, is that you must do what's called slipping and scoring. I'm going to score around the edge of my pinch pot. And I'm going to score where I want it to attach. And then I'm going to use a little bit of plain white vinegar, which helps break down the clay, as slurry. Now, if you don't want to deal with the stinky smell of vinegar, you can just get a piece, a little cup, and put pieces of your clay in it, like this. And once that gets all broken down, it will become slurry. So a yogurt-like consistency. And you can use that instead of vinegar. And then I'm just taking a minute to smooth together all of your seams. So craftsmanship is extremely important anytime you're working with clay, so that things don't start falling apart. If I forget to slip and score my pieces of clay together, as it dries, it's gonna crack apart. So you really wanna make sure you've done a good job joining your pieces of clay together. Next, I'm gonna add all these textures so that I can try to recreate the texture that's here on the seed pod. Now that I have the most challenging aspect of my sculptural piece completed, I need to think about how I can accomplish the other elements on my wall art. One thing that I like to look at is what is furthest away from me, so what's on the background closest to the support piece. And in the image, you can see that it's these spear-shaped leaves that are behind everything else. So I want to make sure that I get those down first before I start adding elements on top of it. To make a spear-shaped leaf, I actually don't want to roll a slab because what you'll end up with is these sharp edges like what you have on your background piece. So you still want to use the pinch method, and I've just pulled off a piece of clay from my bag and started to kind of shape it in that spear shape, and it's a little bit too thick. So now what I'm going to do is employ that pinch method to pinch it out, and that way it can maintain its organic shape and still have the appearance of being very thin. So this is a very slow, methodical process because I'm trying to stay in control, and I want it to make to really look like this leaf shape that I have on my compositional image. I want to give it some movement as well. So as I pinch this clay into this leaf shape, I want to make sure that I'm not deadening the form by making it flat like a piece of paper or stiff like a board. I want it to have that natural appearance that a leaf would have. Since I can see this outline on my tile, the background piece, I want to make sure that I make this leaf just a little bit larger so I don't see those lines that I drew. Just going to hide them. Wrap up all of your pieces together. Make sure that you're not moving your clay off the board, that you have plastic underneath your sculpture, and then you want to keep it covered. If you notice that your project is starting to dry a little bit, you can use a spray bottle of water and just lightly spray it a couple of times before you wrap it up for the day.